Angela Stent is a true authority on Vladimir Putin. She wrote the book on it, literally. She is a senior fellow at the Brookings Institution, and her book was called Putin's World, Russia Against the West and With the Rest. So thank you, Professor Stent, for being with us. As I just said to you, boy, you are in the center of it right now, because I don't go anywhere without seeing people are asking, what is Vladimir Putin thinking? What do you make of what's going on right now? Is Vladimir Putin losing this war the way a lot of people are saying at this moment?
Well, the Russian army is certainly not doing as well as they thought it would do. I wouldn't say the Russians are losing, but they're certainly not winning yet. So, we hear these rumors that he is being badly informed by those around him about what's going on. He doesn't really know fully what's going on, but he knows that the sanctions are hitting hard and they'll hit even harder. And there is some attempt for some negotiations. I think they're virtual at the moment. They met in person a couple of days ago. On the other hand, you hear completely contradictory signals from the Kremlin about whether any progress is being made in these negotiations. So one has to assume that he's sitting and stewing and thinking, how can they recoup this? How can they conduct a war which they can then say that they've won? And I think that's still a major challenge for them now.
You've studied President Putin for years, and so you have a sense of how he may have changed or how his organization may have changed. Is he more isolated and more insulated from honest advice than he was, say, 10 years ago?
Oh, I think people definitely believe that. I mean, I think the COVID pandemic has made that much worse. He's been for over 2 years sort of in a bubble, really quite isolated, apparently only meeting with 4 or 5 of his top aides who've been telling him what he wants to hear, maybe against their better judgment because they know what the real situation is on the ground. So he used to be someone who wasn't such a risk taker. If you look at the Russia-Georgia war in 2008, Russia went in, it recognized 2 entities there. It didn't go to the capital, Tbilisi. It didn't remove the president, Saakashvili. And even in 2014, when Russia annexed Crimea and began a war in the Donbass, it limited itself to what it was doing. And now he seems to have thrown caution to the wind and really thought that he could take over all of Ukraine in 72 hours. So there seems to be an element there where he's taking far more risks, and he's lost maybe that sense of proportion that he had before.
Given that situation, what do you think the best move for the West, for the United States and NATO allies, others, is right now? Should we be actually upping the armament that we're sending in, maybe sending in even heavier weapons? We had a retired general on yesterday said we should send in surface-to-surface missiles so they could strike inside Russia, the Ukrainians.
Well, we're doing what we should. We're already sending more arms to the allies, the NATO allies on the front lines in Eastern Europe. So that, I think, is important. We're doubling down on the sanctions. And there is a debate going on about whether there should be more direct military assistance to the Ukrainians. We're not willing to have a no-fly corridor or even so far to supply them with Soviet-era fighter jets, because the concern is there could then somehow be a direct confrontation between U.S. and Russian, or NATO and Russian troops, and who knows where that would lead. But I think, and we've just announced another huge aid package to Ukraine. So we're doing as much as we can do. The Biden administration having made the decision that it didn't want to risk any kind of direct involvement in this war.
There are, of course, discussions going on. Again, there were renewed virtual discussions today between the Ukrainians on the one hand and the Russians on the other. What do you think the path in negotiations is? Is there a potential diplomatic solution here that Vladimir Putin could accept?
Well, I think there is one. I mean, the Ukrainians are serious about negotiations. They've said they're willing to concede to the Russians that they'll declare neutrality. They won't try and join NATO, but they do want security guarantees from the outside world if they give up this. They've also said, let's talk about Crimea. Let's talk about the Donbass. Let's give, they've said 15 years to talk about the status of these regions, but we're willing to discuss it. So those are all demands that the Russians have made, and where the Ukrainians are willing to engage. The problem is, what is it the Russians are prepared to do? And of course, the demand is from Ukraine that the Russians have to withdraw all the troops to where they were before February 24th, when this war began. And so far, we haven't seen any sign from the Russians that they're willing to do that. But there is a deal that could be made. The question is, do the Russians want it? Is he ready to do it at the moment? He could present this as a victory, saying, Ukraine isn't going to join NATO, so we don't have to be so concerned anymore.
Yeah, and as you just suggested, it's not what the Russians want, it's what one person, Vladimir Putin, wants, from everything we can tell from the outside. You know a lot about this man, and I welcome your view on this very hot-button issue. The United States has said regime change is not U.S. policy. At the same time, can you see a path forward to peace, not just ceasefire, but peace in Ukraine with Vladimir Putin at the helm in Moscow?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. I mean, I can see a path towards a ceasefire that might last for some time, Ukraine making concessions, Russia withdrawing its troops. But I think as long as Putin's in the Kremlin, I doubt that he's going to give up his dream, if you like, his wish, his determination to subjugate Ukraine, to have a Ukraine that is wholly subordinate to Russia. And I think as long as he's there, he's not going to give up. But there may be a pause.
And for the United States and United States allies, the flip side of that is, should we be learning from what happened in Georgia, what happened in Crimea, what happened in parts of the Donbass before, in terms of whatever resolution there is, not encouraging Vladimir Putin to do it yet again in some other area, Baltics area, or take over more Ukraine next time?
Yeah, I mean, after all of those previous conflicts, we sort of went back to business as usual. Not completely after 2014, because we had sanctions, but still, leaders met with Putin and things like that. So I think the lesson we have to draw is that we have to keep up the pressure and make sure that if Russia does agree to a ceasefire and to some kind of peace terms, that they stick to it, and that we don't have another incursion into Ukraine in the near future.